fox trappers believe that you can't put fox or coyote up underneath the trees like this, but I'll guarantee you can, especially later in the year when it's beginning to freeze up. And, this is what keeps you working in cold weather. Frozen ground isn't any big deal, trapping foxes and coyotes on frozen ground. Guys make a lot more of it than they should. And it's really pretty easy. As a matter of fact, when you get trapping on frozen ground, you're going to like a lot more than you are trapping bare ground. Because you're going to find the animals are a lot easier to catch. They come in on your sets more readily. And you can start catching them in places you couldn't catch them on dirt. And it's kind of hard. The old timers used to talk about it's hard to put a fox up against anything you can't see around or over the top of. And when you're dealing with reds, there's a lot of truth to this, especially when they're pups. And it's just like dropping an old country boy down in New York City on 42nd Street. He's never been down there before. He's a little bit flighty of everything around him. And a red fox is something like that. So when he first starts going out on his own, when the family group breaks up, he leaves his home territory, he's coming into all new things. Everything is strange. Everything is constant change. And he's spooky of everything. A red fox is a scaredy cat. He's afraid of his own shadow. If you ever raised any amount of them or had them on pens, you know that. And it isn't that he's smart, he's just spooky. He's suspicious of everything. And when a red fox gets out on his own when he's a pup, he is suspicious. He don't like to be pushed up against anything big or tight that he can't see around. He wants to have them wide open spaces all around him. Now after he's out there for a month or so, he loses a lot of that fear. And you can start pushing him in a lot of places that you couldn't push him before. And when you're working with frozen ground, that doesn't hold true anymore. Now once you start getting that ground gets frozen, you can do no wrong. You can put him up underneath trees just like this. Don't let anybody tell you you can't catch a red fox against a tree like that if the ground is frozen. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They never work foxes on frozen ground. Trust me on this. Oh yeah, you might have one or two that don't go. But by and large, these are what's going to keep you in business. Now, there's been volumes and volumes and volumes written on trapping coyotes and foxes on frozen ground. Some of it good, some of it ain't worth a damn, in my opinion. And I done it all over the years. I trapped in 9 different states. I trapped in Canada. I trapped all over the Southwest, all over the New England states, and up into Canada in 40 below weather, and here in the Adirondacks. And I'm here to tell you that it's no big deal about trapping foxes or coyotes on frozen ground. I'm not talking about snow now. I'm not talking deep snow. That's a whole different ballgame. We're not even going to cover that in this video. I'm talking about frozen ground. And it's amazing where you can put a fox or a coyote. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. If you're out there in that bare ground, Mother Nature will start talking to you. And if you've just got your trap bedded in that dirt out there, you're going to be catching foxes and coyotes right along pretty regularly. And then all of a sudden you're going to get out there some morning. It's going to be a nice, cool, crisp morning. You're going out there and you're going to start finding traps sprung in your trap bed. And they won't be dug out. Ain't no animal messing with them, really. You'll just find them sitting there sprung in the bed and you say, well, Jesus, what am I doing wrong? I got 5, 6, 7, 8 of these this morning. I don't, well, Mother Nature's telling you something. You just aren't listening. And what will happen when those sets start freezing up, and people talk about traps freezing down, that's bullshit. Traps don't freeze down. It's the covering over the top of the traps that gives you trouble. Don't worry about traps freezing down. It can happen, but don't worry about it. If you got a freezing rain, yeah, that does happen. But ordinarily, it's the covering over the trap you got to worry about. Well, Mother Nature's telling you something. And if you get that frost cover there, you might come along and check your trap 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, and that covering's all thawed out. The sun beats on it for 5 minutes, it's thawed it out. The trap's still working. You don't see that. But if you have an animal come along there about 5 o'clock in the morning, happens to hit your set, you'll step on that pan. If you've got an airspace underneath your pan, you push it all the way down to the bottom, the trap doesn't go off. It doesn't go off till that sun hits on it, maybe a couple hours later. You don't realize it. Mother Nature's telling you, you better rig up because she's going to abuse you. And I wondered about that for many, many years. I was out in Arizona one morning, and the first trap I checked, there was a coyote track right dead on the pan. The pan was pushed all the way down, the trap hadn't fired. Frost hadn't gone out of it. And the sun had just broke over the ridge, and I'm sitting there and watching. I said, well, I'll be a son of a... Now I know what that problem was all these years. And I'm sitting there and I'm studying, and I'm looking at the damn thing. I can see the dirt start cracking there. And I'm not smart enough to cover my face. He went off and he kicked dirt in my face, almost blinded me, but I seen the light. You can pretty well tell how much a man's done it in about the first paragraph of his methods, or the first 10 minutes of his instruction. If he doesn't tell you, you got to get off that level ground and get on a hill to leach your water. The man has never trapped foxes or coyotes on frozen ground. He hasn't done it. That's bullshit. Maybe you can get down, you can keep working on that frozen ground. If you're not going to get any deep snow, you can work on those levels. Maybe sprinkle a little salt over your set if you're getting a little rain, a little light freeze at night. That's okay, that'll work. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a transition period. You're getting a rain, a freeze, a rain and freeze. Salt, calcium chloride will do the trick if you want to use that. But if you got a lot of porcupines or deer around, they're going to cause you a lot of problems. All we got to do is just punch in the regular dirt hole set here. Let me get my gloves on. I like to wear my gloves. Good for local color. Good to keep your hands warm. And I like to use them on handling my traps. Now you can get away with a lot of stuff on frozen ground you could never get away with on bare dirt. Trust me with this. I'll take a place like this, dig all these pine needles, get rid of these pine needles, get rid of them. You don't want them, you don't want them for trap cover. They plug your traps. Hemlock, spruce is all right, but not pine. Now you can do one better if you're in the farmland country. You've got a lot of woodchucks. Utilize your woodchuck depths, and you'll find them halfway up the bank or just under the crest of your razorbacks and your hills. And those woodchucks are down after the ground freeze. You're not going to have to worry about any problems from the woodchucks. Set your damn trap on the outside of that burrow. Just use a big bait, punch it down into that woodchuck den. Use them woodchucks holes. And they're great. They're big. There's like a big hole set. And the one advantage of them, your water's leaching off both ways. If you get a late rain or you get a real warm weather and it starts melting off the snow, the water leaches into your hole as well as downhill. It works double as good. If you happen to have the woodchucks. We don't have them here anymore. Now if you're building these on the frozen ground to begin with, now we can build them. We got nice dirt and it's okay to chop down. You're going to have to chop a hole in that frozen ground. You aren't really going to dig one in there. So that time I used a little Hudson Bay axe. And I tried to cut my hole in there like I was chopping a notch in there to make a muskrat set on a log. That frozen ground, get down in it. Now, this is very, very important. When I'm using these sets, these same traps I used earlier in the fall, the dirt sets I'm using on frozen ground, I lengthen out the chain. The reason I lengthen out that chain is so I can dig more of a trench coming down through here. Because this trench serves two purposes. Not only does it serve it to hide your chain and run it down through here where I want it, it's also a trench to leach your water off. Above all else, you got to leach your water off your set. If the snow thaws, if you get a rain, you got to leach that water. You can't make it down there in the flat hayfield and keep it working when that you're getting any rain or the sun doesn't keep it worked off. You can't do it. You'll puddle it up, your trap freeze solid as hell. I don't care what the hell you use on it. I'm going to do it. And I'm not going ahead and dry this earth anchor. You all know what earth anchor is. Now, a lot of guys, I'm a great believer in buckwheat hulls. I love the hell right out of them. And buckwheat hulls have been around for a long, long, long time. It's something I learned off of Pete Rickard and Art Crane many, many, many years ago. And as probably most of you realize, Art Crane was what Pete always called him, was the granddaddy of all fox trappers. And Pete was his ace student. And for years they used buckwheat hulls. At that time we had a pancake flour company, Brown Burhant's Pancake Flour in Coyote, New York. And they made buckwheat pancake flour. So we had access to these buckwheat hulls. Back at that time, they weren't screened out and whatnot like they are the ones that Andy Stoll puts out today. They're all screened out. The chaff, there's no grain or anything in them. Back at that time, there was a lot of grain in them, and you did have a few problems with mice getting in them because of the grain. That doesn't hold true anymore today. But that was a closely guarded secret of just a very few fox trappers at that time, the buckwheat halls. Buckwheat halls are a wonderful, wonderful thing. When I moved away from there and came up in the Adirondacks, I didn't have access to any more buckwheat halls. So I started using hemlock needles. They were pretty good. Pine needles are worthless. They're too big. They're too long. They plug your traps. Spruce needles are much better. They have more oil content on them. They leach the water better. They have a lot more oil content than the hemlock needles. So spruce needles, if you can't get the buckwheat hulls, go to spruce needles. Gather them in the summer, sift them all out, put them in bags, and got them nice and dry for winter. So we'll assume that I drove my earth anchor down here in the lower end of this. Now there's guys that say, I can't bed a trap in buckwheat hulls. Well, of course you can't bed a trap in buckwheat hulls. Jesus, I've seen guys try to bed traps in buckwheat hulls, and they pour a pound of buckwheat hulls there, and they're trying to get the trap to set in there. Of course, you don't. All you do is just use a handful underneath there. You've got this trap dug out. Don't worry if it sets down a little bit lower than that. But they take and they pour half of that can underneath. You only need just a handful. Make sure you put them all the way down your trench too. You don't want that chain freezing in. Now, you take this, and this trap, when you're working frozen ground, doesn't have to be bedded as tightly as when you're working with dirt. The fact that you cut that trench in there is enough to make that, you wedge it in there, roughly. Just enough so it don't bend. There's no give in it whatsoever. Now you use a trap pan cover if you want to. Probably is a good idea. Most of the time I just put the needles right in on top of it, just like that. Now buckwheat hulls are very, very light. I mean, they're just like, you can just blow them all over. A little wind, if you got them out here on a open ridge or something, the wind will blow right off your trap. Or if you get a rain, it doesn't really take much of a rain to wash it off the trap. So you got to take and put just a little dirt over it, and then not much, just barely enough to hold them in place. Or the wind or isn't going to blow them off, or the rain isn't going to wash them off. Don't take much. Just enough to cover them. And if the hulls show through, it doesn't matter. Fox or coyote is not afraid of these hulls. No worries, I've ever trapped. I've trapped right out on the desert sand and all over the United States. I never had foxes or coyotes afraid of hulls. So keep your trap nice and dry. You can rain on that. And you might get, if you get a day of real hard rain and a quick freeze, you might get a little skim over the top. Just like a kind of real thin cow flop. All you got to do is reach under it, flip it off, and the hulls are all dry underneath. If some of those show there, that's okay. You can get a little sprinkle in like that. I think a fox or coyote figures that something's dug out of the hulls. No problem to it whatsoever. This is all I do. I'm trapping on frozen ground. Use my trees for cover. Bed them in here. Make sure your set is on an angle that'll leach your water. Put that fox urine right to the sun a little bit. Don't be ashamed of it. Hey, that stuff's cheap stuff, especially if you're using cow piss. Don't cost you a thing. Cost you a little glycerin. It's a hell of a lot. Your most valuable insurance policies right there. Now's the time, if you want to use bait in your fox sets, now's the time to use your bait. Use a half a rat carcass down in there, a coon leg or whatnot after the ground's frozen. Bait works fine now. And I still use the call stations. If I'm using call stations in here now, I told you always keep them out ahead of your set. But on frozen ground, I kind of reverse it. If I'm uphill here, I put it downhill. I'll throw a carcass out, it'll be downhill. Preferably up in the tree if I can, where I can keep an animal where he's got to work on it. But this is the exception from putting it in the back of my set, rather than up on top. I want to pull him down.